They often tell us that pleasure is the ultimate reward, yet what if this accepted truth is actually a clever misdirection? Consider the quick satisfaction derived from a piece of chocolate, the endless scrolling on a device, a moment of lust, or an easy laugh. What if these are merely sophisticated disguises, cleverly concealing a raw, more profound, and perhaps more painful, underlying human need? It prompts a crucial self-examination. When was the last time you felt genuinely complete without requiring any external supplement? I'm not referring to mere contentment or fleeting entertainment, but a deep, foundational state of being utterly free from the compulsion of craving. The paradox of our era is that we are swimming in an ocean of instant pleasures, yet simultaneously suffering from a kind of spiritual or emotional starvation. The psychologist Carl Jung famously cautioned that the very things we pursue for comfort and relief are frequently the obstacles that prevent us from achieving true healing. By the end of this exploration, your perception of pleasure will be fundamentally transformed. Let's start with a common, relatable scenario. You awaken and instinctively you reach for your phone. You don't consciously know the reason. There is no genuine crisis, nor is there an anticipated moment of happiness awaiting you. Yet, the ingrained habit possesses a far stronger pull than even actual physical hunger. A short video clip, a reel, brings a fleeting 3-second smile. You chuckle, and the memory of the clip instantly fades. Then another clip appears, and then another, pulling you deeper into an infinite vortex of content until suddenly, your entire day has dissolved. The passage of time is unnoticed, but the underlying emotional void, the persistent ache remains. You finally set the phone down, perhaps reaching for a sweet or salty snack, or both. This is soon followed by a familiar sense of guilt. You realize you weren't actually hungry. You simply needed something. And this something was not sustenance, nor was it even a true hit of dopamine. It was at its core a desperate demand for silence, a form of self-administered escape, a brief cessation of an internal, unarticulated storm. Let me illuminate this through the lens of Jungian psychology. Carl Jung posited that every individual harbors a shadow, an aspect of the self that we deliberately suppress and conceal beneath layers of superficial enjoyment and relentless distraction. In this context, pleasure acts as the very tool, the shovel, used to bury this deeper, hidden self. When you consume food without true biological hunger, when you endlessly navigate digital feeds without genuine curiosity, or when you chase desire without authentic love, you are not making a conscious decision for happiness or fulfillment. Instead, you are opting for a form of emotional anesthesia. Here lies the uncomfortable, often avoided truth. For most people, the experience they label pleasure is not true enjoyment. It is simply a temporary reprieve from painful self-awareness. However, the cost of this relief is exorbitant. Every instance of this counterfeit pleasure invariably cultivates a more profound and desperate craving for genuine, soul-nourishing fulfillment. When we fail to attain this true satisfaction, we often misdiagnose ourselves as fundamentally flawed or broken. This assessment is incorrect. We are not broken. We are merely oblivious. We are unaware of the systematic conditioning that has trained us to confuse shallow escape with meaningful enjoyment. We fail to recognize that the quick fix we seek through pleasure is most often a mere symptom of a deeper issue, rather than a sustainable resolution. The avoidance of internal reality is the real problem, not the pleasure itself. This phenomenon goes deeper than mere daily habits. Consider an early developmental memory. Imagine yourself as a 6-year-old child who cries out, but finds no listener. You quickly assimilate the lesson. Expressing distress yields no positive outcome. Conversely, when you manage to smile, when you perform for approval, or when you successfully distract yourself, you receive validation from others. This reward mechanism establishes a powerful, lasting pattern. This deeply ingrained reward pattern, feeling bad, gets no response. But performing and smiling earns validation, is repeated for many years, persisting right into adulthood. In this phase of life, your genuine emotional pain has become mute or unspoken, while the volume of your chosen pleasures increases dramatically. These quick, external gratifications become louder than your own sense of isolation, louder than your deepest anxieties, and significantly louder than the voice of the vulnerable child within you who simply needed acknowledgement and compassion. This brings us to a crucial realization that is missed by the majority of people. Pleasure possesses a profound somatic memory. Every single time you deploy a pleasure-seeking activity as a strategy to silence an inner discomfort, you are effectively programming your nervous system to be terrified of stillness. Stillness, therefore, begins to feel intolerable. This is the psychological reason why you may struggle to sit alone in quiet contemplation, why you feel compelled to have music or podcasts constantly playing, even during a solitary activity like a shower, and why pure silence begins to feel like a profound form of emotional punishment. Jung was keenly aware of this dynamic. He recognized how pleasure, when utilized as an avoidance mechanism, morphs into an adversary of the soul's growth. This is not because pleasure is inherently negative or immoral, but precisely because of the way we weaponize it. The true danger is not the enjoyment itself, but the wholesale avoidance of self-confrontation that it enables and encourages. Before we proceed further into this concept, I encourage you to pause and reflect. If this discourse resonates with you, if you have ever experienced that perplexing and slightly corrosive guilt immediately following an indulgence that, by all accounts, should have delivered pure happiness, I urge you to consider subscribing. Do this not just to help amplify this critical message to a wider audience, but to affirm a deeper connection. You are not facing this internal conflict in isolation. Furthermore, take a moment to engage in self-reflection by commenting below. Which specific point or moment in this discussion has been the most impactful or jarring for you thus far? It is vital to understand that acknowledging this personal struggle is not a display of weakness. On the contrary, it is an act of profound strength, the strength to truly witness your own internal landscape. Now allow me to fully articulate the nature of the trap we fall into. Picture a lone figure wandering endlessly through a vast desert, perpetually chasing after seductive mirages. Every time they rush toward one of these illusory pools of water, it instantly dissolves into thin air. Yet, they are incapable of stopping the pursuit, convinced that the next mirage will finally be the real, satisfying oasis. This analogy precisely captures the nature of pleasure when it is pursued without any deeper, intentional purpose. The great irony inherent in this pursuit is that authentic pleasure, the kind that genuinely sustains and nourishes the soul, is almost always characterized by its quietness. It is an experience that does not demand immediate attention, does not necessitate frantic distraction, and crucially, does not serve to numb your senses or awareness. Instead, real pleasure inherently expands your sense of self and your engagement with life. It is discovered within a meaningful, deep-diving conversation. It is experienced upon the successful completion of a task you previously found intimidating. It is felt in the moment of waking up and realizing, with profound relief, that the compulsive, controlling habit that once dictated your life has finally lost its grip. However, we often do not genuinely crave this elevated type of pleasure. Why? Because it requires effort, discipline, and presence. It is not an easy access indulgence. And yet, this effortful, soulful satisfaction is arguably the only form of gratification truly worth pursuing. Carl Jung observed this human tendency perfectly, writing that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. In this context, pleasure, as often practiced, becomes the most elegantly appealing, yet utterly absurd, invention we have ever utilized for self-avoidance. Let's momentarily take a step back and revisit a childhood moment, a critical point of psychological programming. Imagine yourself as a child who falls down and severely scrapes a knee. The injury stings and you react with tears. The response you receive, however, is not pure validation of the pain. Instead, a caregiver might immediately intervene with a distraction. Here, don't cry, have a cookie, or stop crying, look. Your favorite cartoon is starting now. This seemingly insignificant event leaves an indelible imprint, not just on your conscious memory, but on your neurological wiring. Your brain instantaneously learns a crucial, survival-oriented lesson: pain equals punishment. Feeling emotional discomfort equals weakness. And the reliable solution is immediate pleasure. As a result, you mature without ever consciously recognizing it, becoming supremely fluent in the language of distraction. Pleasure effectively functions as your personal translator. It speaks eloquently when you are too scared or unwilling to articulate the simple phrase, "I am not okay." It compels you to engage in a lively performance when you are too emotionally drained to confess, "I feel completely empty." It forces a smile onto your face when your deepest urge is to scream in frustration or sadness. Yet, here's the critical warning that remains unspoken by society. Every instance in which you substitute a genuine, authentic emotion with a quick external stimulation, you suffer a measurable loss of intimacy with your genuine self. Carl Jung was very clear about this consequence, warning that when the inner world is systematically ignored and suppressed, the outer world inevitably increases its volume and intensity to compensate. And what precisely is modern pleasure, if not the loudest, most insistent noise in our lives? The constant noise, the immediate scroll, the incessant buzz, the notification ping. The compulsive binge serves a singular purpose. These sounds effectively scream, so loudly that we don't have to engage in the painful process of listening to ourselves. But what exactly are we so desperately avoiding listening to? We are avoiding the subtle but persistent ache that lies beneath the surface. We are avoiding the fundamental human need for meaning. We are avoiding the innate desire to belong. Most significantly, we are avoiding the lingering wound of feeling unseen or unacknowledged. It is critical to grasp that pleasure itself is not inherently detrimental. In fact, it can be truly sacred when it is selected with genuine intention and awareness. However, it quickly transforms into a profound psychological poison when it is used to wholesale replace authentic presence. This brings up a crucial question for self-inquiry. Have you ever experienced a wave of guilt immediately after an indulgent moment of pleasure? This might be after watching one more unnecessary episode, after texting someone you knew you shouldn't, after purchasing something you didn't genuinely need, or after eating when you felt no physical hunger. That feeling of guilt is not arising because you committed an inherently evil act. It surfaces because a wiser, deeper part of your consciousness recognizes that you were not truly nourished or fed by the action. Instead, you successfully managed to avoid the experience of hunger, the underlying emotional need. This common misinterpretation often obscures the core of Carl Jung's work. Many assume that shadow work involves adopting a darker or more cynical persona. That is a superficial misunderstanding. True shadow work is the brave act of observing the specific moments when you prioritize momentary relief over your own well-being and saying, clearly and decisively, "I see what I did, and I choose truth over comfortable escape." Consider, for example, the narrative of an individual who was unable to discontinue a pattern of intensely chasing romantic relationships. This person characterized themselves as being hopelessly romantic. However, every single relationship followed an identical, predictable cycle: initial intense euphoria, followed by obsessive attachment, a dramatic collapse, and then the inevitable repetition of the cycle. When directly questioned about their inability to break this pattern, Their explanation was, "I just deeply love love." This was in fact an untruth. What they truly cherished was the distraction that the intensity of a new relationship offered. The underlying reality was that when they were forced to endure solitude, the internal silence became uncomfortably, intolerably loud. It turned out they had never acquired the essential emotional skill of simply sitting with and processing their own unhealed emotional wounds. Consequently, immediate pleasure became the psychological plaster applied to the injury, until the superficial patch inevitably failed to hold the pain in check any longer. This type of hidden, psychological story is far from rare. In fact, it is the unspoken narrative shared by millions. These are the people who consistently confuse genuine longing with authentic love, who mistake endless digital scrolling for real joy, and who mistakenly substitute emotional numbing for true healing. The genuine threat to well-being is not the mere existence of these tempting, immediate pleasures. The profound danger materializes when we fail to consistently question the underlying reasons for our reliance on them. Therefore, we must decisively dismantle a prevalent cultural myth. Pleasure is not healing. Pleasure is not true peace. Pleasure is not enduring power. Pleasure, fundamentally, is merely a tool. And like any powerful tool, when it is utilized incorrectly or for the wrong purposes, it swiftly becomes a source of great personal danger. Let us now fundamentally reframe this perspective. Let's fundamentally invert this entire dynamic. Recall the last occasion when you actively practiced delayed gratification. You successfully resisted the immediate urge to check that message, quelled that intense craving, or avoided that clickbait link. Later, you experienced a genuine feeling of peace, serenity, and self-respect. Why did this sense of fulfillment occur? Because discipline is far more than mere external control. It is the building block of self-trust. And this profound self-trust is the true, sustainable high we are ultimately seeking. When you operate from a position of unwavering trust in your own choices, immediate pleasure loses its power to control you. Instead, you are empowered to choose it intentionally, with full awareness and complete freedom. In this state, pleasure is restored to its beautiful, intended function. It is no longer a psychological drug or a burdensome chain, but a pure celebration of life. Now, project an internal image. You enter an empty, silent room. There is no external stimulation, no phone, just your singular presence. Instead of the familiar wave of internal panic, you experience a feeling of being completely at home. This feeling arises not because you possess everything externally, but because you recognize that you are everything internally. This exemplifies what Jung referred to as individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole. This wholeness is achieved not through self-denial, nor through relentless, constant effort, but through fundamental integration of your conscious and unconscious parts. It is the sophisticated ability to enjoy pleasure without deploying it as an emotional bandage. It is the capacity to embrace silence without fearing the emptiness it once represented. Ultimately, it is the ability to simply be present with yourself and genuinely appreciate the person you are with. The ultimate goal is not reached by relentlessly chasing temporary, intense highs. Rather, you achieve it by deliberately lowering the volume of all your external distractions and finally listening intently to what those constant sounds were so effectively covering up. So what does this essential internal work practically look like in your daily life? It involves noticing the precise moment you instinctively reach for your phone and then pausing to ask yourself a critical question. What emotional reality am I trying to avoid right now? It requires the difficult but necessary act of allowing yourself to fully feel a wave of genuine loneliness, instead of immediately patching that feeling with sugar, with casual intimacy, or with aimless scrolling. It means intentionally choosing the slower pleasure, the satisfaction that demands sustained effort, requires total presence, and arrives with a delayed, Earned reward. This leads us to a powerful, often overlooked truth. Real pleasure is not instantaneous. It is earned. The most fulfilling laughter is shared with a person you trust deeply. The most satisfying meal is the one consumed after a long day of meaningful, intentional effort. The most profound connection occurs after a vulnerable conversation where you felt truly seen, not merely acknowledged or digitally swiped. I invite you to take a moment of internal pause. If this message has successfully disturbed or shaken something deep within your internal world, that is a positive indication. That internal disturbance is exactly what an awakening feels like. It is rarely grand or theatrical. It is a quiet yet decisive shift. And the decision you face is profoundly simple. Will I continue to numb the underlying emotional ache with quick, fleeting pleasures? Or will I choose to meet myself fully, with courage, and without the need for emotional anesthesia? Carl Jung famously theorized that our pervasive neuroses are not solely caused by traumatic events themselves, but rather by our ingrained refusal to confront and integrate the psychological aftermath that trauma leaves behind. Unconscious reliance on pleasure serves as the perfect mechanism to ensure that confrontation never takes place. But now that this pattern is visible to you, what decisive action will you take? We must go even deeper now. You have internalized the warnings and felt the distinct tremors of recognition. The seductive mask of false pleasure is beginning to slip. Now we arrive at the most challenging truth, a truth that not only stings but fundamentally shatters old illusions. To truly liberate your life from the control of false pleasure, you must admit something terrifyingly honest. You have been quietly betraying yourself. This betrayal was not a singular event. It was a cumulative daily process of self-abandonment. It happened every time you impulsively reached for the quick fix. Every time you rationalized just 5 more minutes. Every time you avoided silence because it felt too loud. Every time you convinced yourself, this makes me feel good, when in reality, it only helped you temporarily forget the pain. Crucially, this realization is not meant to induce shame. It is the moment of your awakening. You are not weak for resorting to behaviors you believed would keep you emotionally secure. You are not broken for craving something that dulled the persistent ache. You were merely in survival mode, and now you are finally poised to truly live. Once you clearly perceive this self-defeating loop, once you understand that most of your pursued pleasure was sedation, not joy, the old attractions lose their magnetism. The social gathering no longer feels the same. The digital scroll fails to scratch the itch. The casual hookup does not fill the void. The sugar does not soothe the silent scream. This happens because the real pain was never about being bored. It was about the absence of your authentic self. Visualize your life as a house. Inside this house resides your wounded inner child, your ignored truth, and your unhealed memories. But instead of walking through the front door to meet them, you construct an elaborate external entertainment system. Constant music, bright lights, candy, and comfort. You throw a loud, distracting party in the yard while your inner self waits patiently, unseen. This is the function of unchecked pleasure. It builds a carnival outside your emotional house so that you never feel the need to step inside. Real healing, conversely, involves walking through the silence, entering the house, sitting directly with that inner child, and simply saying, I am here now. You are safe to speak. Jung desired for people to become unafraid of stillness, recognizing that silence is not the absence of life, but the powerful presence of everything we have systematically avoided. This leads to the final myth that must be completely shattered. You have been culturally conditioned to believe that pleasure is the ultimate goal, that happiness is synonymous with feeling good, and that greater indulgence equates to more freedom. But true freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the radical ability to not need to do those things anymore. True pleasure is not the sweet treat, the glowing phone, or the ego validation. True pleasure is the quiet, profound moment of realizing you no longer require distraction from your own self. You can sit in pure stillness and smile, not because the space is empty, but because it is full of your presence, your truth, and your inherent power. You transform into the kind of person who doesn't desperately chase the high, because you already carry an inner peace. People will undoubtedly notice this change. They will remark that you speak slower, pause more often, and laugh less frequently, yet more genuinely. They will ask, "Why don't you socialize as much? Why are you largely off social media? Why don't you text back immediately?" And you will simply smile. They won't comprehend that you are no longer avoiding anything. You are simply, powerfully present. This presence is what fundamentally intimidates most people. When an individual stops needing external pleasure to feel whole, they become uniquely potent, uncontrollable, undistracted, and unmanipulable. Pleasure can no longer lure them. Marketing cannot hypnotize them. Addictions lose all their power because presence has returned. And presence is the purest form of self-rebellion. Jung declared, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And who you are, at your core, is not a dopamine addict. You are not a bundle of cravings. You are not a passive consumer of feelings. You are a creator of meaning, and meaning is seldom immediately pleasurable. In fact, it is often demanding, exhausting, and inconvenient. But it is fundamentally real, and it will nourish you in ways immediate pleasure never could. So the next time a craving surfaces, pause. Do not fight it or shame it, but ask, "What do I truly need right now?" That single question holds the power to break the entire loop. It returns the pen to your hand, reminding you that you are not your hunger. You are the conscious agent who chooses how to feed it. You will never view pleasure the same way again, not because it is evil, but because you now see it with absolute clarity. You will still laugh, still love, and still enjoy life's sweetness, but you will do so with awareness. And that awareness is your shield, protecting you from trading your hard-won peace for momentary, shallow comfort. It will make your joys sacred, your relationships clean, your habits strong, and your silence golden. For the only kind of pleasure worth having is the kind you no longer need to desperately chase. If this video has made you see things differently, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you next time.